Hello and welcome to Baking Butterly Love. Have you ever wondered how to store buttercream? Or maybe what to do with it after it's been sitting in the freezer for a while? Well, in this video, I'll show you how I like to store buttercream and how to reconstitute it after it's been stored in the fridge or freezer. So first things first, buttercream keeps really well when sealed in an airtight container. It'll keep in the fridge for about a week or so, or in the freezer for 3 to 4 months. You can use any type of container that you like, just make sure it's really well sealed, otherwise your buttercream might absorb some weird odors. And I do almost always have some extra buttercream floating around in my fridge or freezer. Partly because I like to make it ahead of time, and partly because I always like to make extra for every project. I think it's usually a good idea to have a little extra just in case something goes wrong. I find it useful to keep small scraps of colored buttercream because sometimes you only need a little bit of a particular color. For example, sometimes I only need a few dots of yellow to finish the center of some flowers. So you can freeze colored buttercream or flavored buttercream, and you can even freeze piped decorations like these flowers. And it's also a good idea to label your buttercream so that you don't forget what it is. I even painted an entire cake with scraps of leftover colored buttercream before. I'll leave a link for that video if you want to check it out. But the point is, you have lots of options to use up any buttercream that you might be storing in your freezer. So that's storage. Now, when you're ready to use your buttercream, you need to do two things. First, you need to thaw it out or bring it back to room temperature. And second, you need to re-whip it to get that smooth consistency again. So here I have a big batch of buttercream that I prepped and froze ahead of time. I've already let it sit out on the counter for a few hours to come back to room temperature. You can see that after sitting in the freezer, the buttercream is no longer smooth. It looks a little bit clumpy and it has kind of a lot of air pockets in it. This is Italian meringue buttercream, and basically the cold temperatures have caused the butter to separate from the meringue. But even if you're using a different type of buttercream, not a meringue-based buttercream, it's still going to look something like this out of the freezer. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually just mix it with the paddle attachment of my mixer for a few minutes. Alright, so after a few minutes of mixing, it's looking a lot better, but it's actually still a bit cold and it's not quite as smooth as I'd like it to be. So to smooth it out a bit more, I'm going to take out a small portion and melt it. So here is what the buttercream looks like melted. I used 5 to 10 second intervals in the microwave to melt the buttercream, stirring in between each interval. You just want to get it to a barely liquid consistency, but be careful not to scorch it. And as far as amounts to melt, I usually do somewhere between 1/3 to 1/2 of the buttercream, depending on how cold it is. Basically, the colder your buttercream is, the larger portion you'll want to take out to melt. Then it's just a matter of putting that melted buttercream right back into the bowl and mixing everything together for another few minutes. So now you can see that warming it up just a few degrees with that melted buttercream has really smoothed everything out. This buttercream is probably about 75 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't normally use a thermometer, I always go by looks, but it is nice to know that temperature range, especially if you're a beginner. Anything between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit will be workable, but the closer it is to 70, it's going to be a lot stiffer, and the closer it is to 80, it's going to be a lot looser. Alright, so to recap, buttercream keeps well when stored in an airtight container in the fridge for about a week, or in the freezer for about 3 to 4 months. When you're ready to use the buttercream, let it come down to room temperature and mix with the paddle attachment until it's smooth and creamy again. If the buttercream is too cold, melt a small portion and then mix that back in with the rest to bring the temperature up. If you're looking for buttercream recipes, I have videos for both Swiss and Italian meringue buttercream. You can find those linked in the description below. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing to my channel for more cake decorating tips and tutorials.